For 2 million years, the moment the sun went down, a piece of your ancestors' brain quietly decided they might not survive the night. Not the vague, uncomfortable kind of worry. A specific, real thought. I might not survive this. They were right often enough that the fear never went away. It just moved into you. In a South African cave, a paleontologist named Bob Brain pulled a fossil skull out of the rock and found 2 holes punched through the back of it. Not cracks, not damage from a fall. Holes, spaced exactly the width of a leopard's lower canines. Someone measured the gap and matched it to the jaw. A leopard killed this person, dragged them into a tree and ate them there, in the dark, the same way leopards still do tonight, in forests you'll never see. That skull belonged to one of us, a direct branch of the line that eventually became you, reading this, in a bed, behind a door that locks. What actually stopped me was the math. We didn't get fire for another 1.5 million years after that skull went into the dirt. 1.5 million years of nights, with nothing but bodies, darkness, and whatever people could invent to survive it. You already know what that feels like a little. The floor creaks in a sleeping house and your whole body goes still before your brain catches up. You've said someone's name into the dark, not because you needed an answer, just to hear them answer back. That's not a modern habit, it's an inheritance. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where it came from. Because what they did with those nights didn't just keep them alive, it built the parts of you that still refuse to fully sleep. Every evening had the same shape. As the light went orange and then gray, the band stopped moving, not because they wanted to, but because the ground itself turned dangerous the moment nobody could see it. They climbed. This is the part people forget. Long before home meant a fire, home meant height. Chimpanzees and gorillas still do this tonight, in forests you've never seen. Early hominins built nests in the trees each evening, bending branches and folding leaves into a platform assembled in minutes and abandoned by morning. A new bed every night, built by hand, before the light ran out. Nobody kept the same bed twice. There was no point. The nest wasn't a home, it was a decision, made fresh each evening. Tonight we sleep here, because this branch is thick enough that a leopard's weight would wake us before its teeth did. That's not folklore, it's math predators still lose today. The band slept close, skin against skin, the smallest ones in the middle, the largest at the edges. It's a shape you'd recognize instantly if you've ever shared a bed with someone during a thunderstorm, curling in without thinking about it, some old circuitry making the decision for you. They weren't being sentimental. They were building a perimeter out of bodies, because a body is warm, and a body can scream. Once they were up there, pressed together, listening, that's when the real questions of prehistory begin. Something had to fill the hours between the light going and the light coming back. That gap wasn't empty. It turned into almost everything that came after. What stopped me here wasn't the predators. It was the sounds, or really, the voices. Every social primate that sleeps in groups does something researchers call contact calling, a soft, repeated vocal check-in through the dark, confirming, I'm here, you are there, we're still together, without anyone needing to move or look. Chimpanzees do it, gorillas do it. Based on comparative primatology and the anatomy of early hominin ears and throats, the working assumption is that our ancestors did too, a low, murmured back and forth, threading through the black hours of the night. Think about what that means. Before language had grammar, before there were words for mother or danger or cold, there was already something close to texting a friend, "You up?" at 2 a.m. just to hear back that they were. That's the unfamiliar familiar, the thing that should live in a textbook and instead lives in your own chest. The dark was never really about seeing, it was about being heard. Every time you've woken from a nightmare and said your partner's name into a dark room, not to ask a question, just to hear the shape of their voice answer, you were doing something a hominin did in a tree 1.5 million years ago for exactly the same reason. Not because they needed information. Being alone in the dark and being unheard in the dark are two different kinds of terror, and only one of them gets fixed with a whisper. There's a specific loneliness in this, not the loneliness of being by yourself, but the loneliness of lying awake surrounded by people you love, listening, because your body won't let you stop. The watch that never fully clocks out, even when you are safe, even when everyone around you is breathing slow and even. They didn't always win that watch. In 1924, a fossilized skull was pulled from a limestone quarry near Tong, South Africa. A child, maybe 3 years old, one of the earliest hominin fossils ever found. Decades later, researchers studying the eye sockets found puncture and gouge marks matching the talons of a large eagle. A 3-year-old, killed from above, probably in daylight. But the pattern holds, the same pattern that ruled the nights. You were never, not for a single hour of your short life, entirely off the menu. The child had a name, probably. We'll never know it, but the child had one. Not every threat announced itself with teeth. Some of the worst nights were the quiet ones, the nights nothing happened, and the not happening was its own kind of torture. Total darkness on an open landscape does something specific. Your ears become the only sense that still works, and your ears are liars. A twig snapping under a rabbit sounds identical to a twig snapping under something that wants to eat your children. There's no way to tell the difference except waiting, frozen, heart slamming, for a second sound that either confirms the danger or never comes. Psychologists have a name for what this does to a body over hours: hypervigilance, the nervous system stuck in the on position, unable to downshift even after the threat is gone. You have felt a small version of this. The nights you couldn't sleep because of a work deadline, when every noise the house made felt personal, felt aimed at you, even though you knew it was just the pipes. Multiply that by every night, for an entire life, with actual leopards in it, and you start to understand what rest meant to them. They rested the way a soldier rests, not deeply, not all the way down. A kind of sleep that kept one hand on the door. Some anthropologists use the term sentinel behavior for the strategy bands likely relied on. Someone stays lighter sleeping, more awake, rotating through the group across the night, the way meerkats post a lookout, the way new parents take shifts with a crying baby without ever discussing whose turn it is. Somebody was always a little bit awake. Every single night for 2 million years, somebody in your ancestral line chose to stay a little bit awake, so the others could go a little further down. Call it habit hardened by necessity rather than pure instinct. It's the oldest act of love we have any evidence for, and it left no fossil at all. Only the fact that enough children survived to have children of their own. By the time you are deep enough into a night with no fire, something else starts happening, and it's the part that actually built us. Storytelling doesn't wait for language to be perfect. Long before hominins had full grammar, they very likely had something that worked like it. Gesture, rhythm, repeated sound, the beginnings of narrative glue holding a group's attention through the worst hours. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, like the Juhoansi of the Kalahari, have found something striking. During the day, conversation is almost entirely practical: food, tools, complaints, gossip. At night, around whatever light they have, the subject flips almost entirely to story, myth, history, the dead, the stars. The theory is that this pattern is old, maybe older than fire, that the dark itself was the original invitation to tell a story, because a story is one of the only things that can hold a frightened mind still without a flame to stare at. You know this pattern. You lived it as a kid, in a sleeping bag, in a backyard, with a flashlight under your chin, telling a story you half believed, just to feel the specific thrill of being scared somewhere safe. You didn't invent that. You inherited it, from every generation stacked up behind you, all the way back to a group of hominins in a tree with no fire and no words yet, doing the closest thing they could to the same thing, filling the black hours with sound, because silence in the dark has always been the enemy, and noise, even scared noise, even made-up noise, has always worked as a kind of shield. The dark didn't just threaten them, it built something in them too. The instinct to check on someone, to fill a silence, to tell a story that makes someone else feel less alone. Some of the earliest pressure to develop those skills may have come from nothing more complicated than surviving until sunrise, together, instead of alone. Then, somewhere around 1 million years ago, everything changed. Not all at once, and not the way the movies show it. In Wonderwerk Cave, a deep limestone chamber in South Africa's northern Cape, archaeologists found layers of ash and burned bone dated to roughly 1 million years old, some of the earliest solid evidence anywhere on Earth of hominins controlling fire inside a cave rather than just scavenging it from a wildfire after the fact. Not a lightning strike they huddled near for an hour. A managed fire. A fire someone tended. Think about the size of that shift. For nearly 2 million years before this, the dark was simply the dark, and you survived it with bodies, whispers, and stories. Then, one night, somewhere, someone figured out how to keep a small piece of daylight alive after the sun went down. It didn't fix the fear, it just gave the fear somewhere to look. Later evidence from a site called Gesher Benot Yaakov, in what's now Israel, dated to around 790,000 years ago, shows something even more human. Burned flint and wood clustered in the same spots, over and over, suggesting a hearth used again and again, in the same place, night after night. Not a fire, the one everyone knew where to find. That's the moment home stopped being a decision made fresh every evening in a tree and started being a place you could return to. That's the moment the nest, built new every single night for 2 million years and never slept in twice, finally became something else. A fire doesn't move. A fire waits for you. Fire didn't end the fear. It just gave it a shape you could stare at. You still do this. Every campfire you've sat around, every candle you've lit during a power outage, every screen you've scrolled in a dark room at 1 a.m. Same behavior, same reflex. Find the small bright thing, put your back to the dark, watch the light instead of the shadows around it. The leopard bite in that skull is close to 2 million years old. Your instinct to check the door is locked before bed isn't separate from that bite. It's the same nervous system, still running the same program, in a body that hasn't needed to outrun a leopard in generations. That's the part that should sit with you. Not that they were scared, that you still are, and you don't even notice, because it's dressed up now as just double-checking or just a habit or, I don't know, I just like a nightlight. The nest comes back here, and it comes back cruel. Every night for 2 million years, a hominin built something with their own hands to survive the dark, and abandoned it by morning, because permanence was a luxury they didn't have yet. You have permanence now. You have walls and locks and a fire that never goes out because it lives in a wire in the ceiling. And some nights, you still lie there listening to the house settle, running the same watch they ran, for threats that mostly don't exist anymore. The fear outlived the leopards. That's not something you can shrug off as a coincidence. It's an unbroken line. Somebody in a tree stayed a little bit awake so the others could rest, and some nights without knowing why, so do you. So what did they do at night before fire? Roughly what you did the last time the power went out and you sat in the dark with someone you love, talking, because talking was the only tool left. They whispered. They took turns staying awake. They lost children to the dark and climbed back into the trees anyway, because there was nowhere else to go. And somewhere in those 2 million years of practice, they built the exact muscles you are using right now to feel unsettled by this story. The capacity to imagine a threat you can't see, and to reach for someone else's voice as the antidote. Somewhere on that landscape one morning, a small group came down out of a tree they'd never sleep in again, stiff and cold and alive, and did it all over the next night. They did this 10,000 times, 100,000, long enough that the doing became you. You didn't inherit fire from them. Fire came later, and it was never really the point. What you inherited was the thing they built while waiting for fire. The whisper, the shift, the story told to keep the dark at bay, the body that goes still when the floor creaks. You'll do it again tonight. You'll check the lock or leave a light on or say goodnight one more time into the dark just to hear it answered back. You won't think about why, but now you know. Somebody in a tree taught you that.